Somebody should do something about that. Roy and I are going to have a conversation on this live that will be later shared about the source of change, to be able to actually be the influence over something, over our own life. I would expect that every single one of us on planet Earth would like to get better at influencing our circumstances, influencing our relationships and situations. So Coach Roy are going to discuss how to do that. At times, fair. It's so difficult. So Roy's going to pop on here in a moment, and we're going to talk source of change, being at the source of change. All right, Roy, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Wherever you are in the world, feel free, you guys, to write in the chat where you are tuning in from as we join in this conversation on, we kind of have a number of titles of it. You know, we could call it being at the source of, being the source of change. We could call it being the one to influence something, or we could call it what you were sharing with me yesterday, which is
responsibility begins with the willingness to be cause in the matter of one's own life, whether experienced at the time or not.
Did everybody get that?
That's a mouthful.
Say it again.
Well, first, just to get going, the context, you and I have been discussing the whole thing around 10X. And I find this particular topic, like living one's life 10X, like to the absolute fullest that one can, because I'll repeat it and then we can get into it. So responsibility begins with the willingness to be cause in the matter of one's own life, whether experienced at the time or not.
Okay, so we're gonna break that down in today's call, what that means, why it matters. We know that sometimes coaching and therapy, it can get a little wordy, you know, and none of the work we here to do is to give you more words to describe life. We're here to actually make a difference, because words actually don't teach. Experiences teach. And so all these words that we're sharing, all these discussions that we're sharing are actually to make a difference. And so when you're listening to this live, when you're listening to this recording, look for what difference can be made for you with whatever circumstance you're currently dealing with. That's my invitation.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, there we go. That's so responsibility. What you just created there was a whole world in being responsible for how one views the world. So to break this statement down is, so first of all, I resisted this whole thing for years. Like, no, I'm only responsible for my life. I can't be responsible for anyone else's life. And I really got how unwilling I was. So we just take
talk. It might even be to that extent. It might even be like, I'm not responsible for my life. Other people are responsible for my life. For a long time in relationships, I expected that my partner was responsible for my security.
Mm-hmm.
And guess how that went? Well, anytime I was insecure, I would blame it on them. I would expect them to make me feel better and do something about it. And in turn, they didn't end up getting the person that they signed up to date, which was a secure, confident man. It later turned into an insecure, scared boy, which inevitably disintegrated those relationships. Now, this is a common myth that a lot of us think is like, my partner should always make me feel better. Well, what about when you're using your own insecurities and not being responsible for your own well-being? It's like, well, now we've become a caretaker. I'm not saying we don't take care of each other. My wife takes care of me, and I take care of her in a lot of different ways. But we don't expect one another to become the sole provider of each other's security. So,
or
getting into this
happiness.
conversation, go ahead. Or happiness,
or happiness, or sexuality, or nurturing our food, like all of those things. To actually share, as you were saying earlier, or influence what's going on around us, or participate fully, or go back and forth with the human where there's this amazing exchange, and we all have friends and family that it's just we can hardly wait to be in each other's company. Well, I say that that's all a function of how willing we are to be responsible for our participation.
Participation meaning like in relationships, like how much I
In
actually,
relationships.
right? Am I responsible for, putting my phone away when we're, at the dinner table? Am I responsible for how I greet my wife? Am I actually being responsible for how I want to show up as a partner?
Yeah. Well, there's a perfect example how I'm going to greet my wife. Well, so responsibility begins with the willingness to be cause in the matter. Well, so the wife shows up after shopping and it's been horrendous. Or no, let's put this scenario. She's had the baby all day and you've been out, and she gets home and she's cranky, and here, take the kid. I'm done now. And rather than going, oh, honey, how's it? You've had a rough day with him. Oh, come on, let's just debrief here a bit, and then put him down for a second, and then be at the reaction of being handed the baby.
Right, right.
Versus stop in that moment, being willing to be responsible for, wait a minute, I've been out all day. She's at home with the baby, and he's been crying and cranky, and that's a tough scenario to deal with. Okay, well that's a whole other scenario. Well, I'm not responsible for her and how cranky the baby is. I've been out all day.
Right.
Well,
Right. I've been working and you've been doing. Then we get into comparing, which happens a lot in relationships. It's like I'm doing more than you. Well, it's all a matter of perspective on what more is.
yeah, well, exactly. So when we stop and we're willing to be cause in the matter of something, or we're willing to exchange with that person, and the more on the court we can get this, the better, right? We don't want it to be conceptual. We want it to be what it looks like on the court.
I think
So
one example I see in that is, which to me is quite common, is people who come into our work or are considering doing coaching who are really good at making lists of what their partners should be like.
yeah,
Like this big long list. Okay, I want this person who's charming and handsome and beautiful and works hard, but also has time for me, but is patient, but is also ambitious, and like this big long list. And then we flip. This is what we do in coaching. We actually have you write out your dream. We have you write out all the things that you desire, how you want it to be. We qualify it, and then we ask, what kind of person gets to have that kind of life? Who would you need to be to live that kind of life? And we don't like to. That's where the willingness comes in. You mean I have a say? Like part of this is up to me. Instead, a lot of people can not. I'm not gonna say most. I'm gonna say a lot of people can go. I wrote out my beautiful future. Now I'm just gonna sit here and wait for it to show up. Let me know when it's ready, universe. Let me know when it's ready.
Yeah, no cause in the matter there. No influencing anything there. It's sit around and wait for it. Well, let's just go back a bit. There's a concept out here called being radically responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine, he came up. It's out there, but he gave it to me, and I just absolutely love this, because to live a life of 10x times 10, it really takes being radically responsible for how we show up in relationship. And I say that how we do that is to be willing to be cause in the matter, to be willing to be, this is just as much my responsibility as it is yours, even though I wasn't there all day because I've been working and you've had the baby. Wait a minute, let's just stop and regroup here and put him down and let him play for a second, where I can give my partner a huge hug, even though she's not asking for one. Just be with her for a second. Anything you need from me right now, I got it. You've been with the baby all day. What do you need from me right now? Who cares how I feel? Who cares? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I can see right over there that the look on her face, the stress level, the whatever she's been dealing with. Now, if I don't stop in that moment, that could actually carry on for another hour or two. And Meanwhile, I knew that all I had to do was stop and be with her for a moment, acknowledge her for being an extraordinary partner and mother while you're out working. She's at home taking care of the family. Like that action in itself would alter the whole rest of the evening and the week.
And what do you think keeps us from taking those actions, from being radically responsible in that situation?
Because we're unwilling. We're unwilling to own 100% of it. It's always, well, my part is, okay, fair enough. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of being radically responsible, is to say, oh, that's my part. Okay, well, how about we go further and actually go over there with another person? Actually see it. We humans have psychic capabilities. We are very, even though we don't like to admit it, we can read body language. In fact, studies show that 60% of communication is body language, not words. It's eye contact, it's facial expression, it's the vibe that comes off of another person, the way they hold their body, the way they look. It's all extraordinary. And so pretend that we don't know what's going on over there is just nonsense, because we do. So when we're causing the matter, when we're responsible, that, hey, wait a minute, I can see over there what's going on. I'm going to stop making this about me and my hard day at work and actually be over there with that person. That is a person that's willing,
Mm-hmm.
just willing. And the whole concept around willingness in relationship is extraordinary to me. The word is, in my view, is extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, well, I think many of us don't look at life like it has that kind of choice to it. So
Mm-hmm.
like when we're talking about responsibility, I want to clarify something really important. When we're talking about responsibility, we're not talking about obligation. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about who is at fault. One of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest things that we work with people on is to help people look at where they can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most common things that we experience with people is they'll tell us how the other person is doing something, or how this situation is unfair, or how I'm stuck. And what our goal is in coaching is to help you see a point of view where you can influence anything.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to influence anything, we first have to let go of the idea that we are in fact stuck. We have to be open to a new perspective. And from
Mm-hmm.
here, we can actually choose to be responsible for something. We don't have to be responsible for anything. You can walk around and be like, I'm going to be an asshole, and I don't care. And I'm going to be a careless person. And you can do that. We're not saying that that's even a bad thing. It's not a fulfilling way to live. It's not going to be exciting and wonderful. So if our level of influence determines how much we're willing to be responsible, now I can go, if I'm going out dating, can I be responsible for the judgments, the preconceived notions that I have about the opposite sex or other people I'm dating or the same sex? Can I be responsible for those stories I've been making up? Can I be responsible for what I wear, for how I smell, for being well showered? Can I be responsible for being curious in that?
Mm-hmm.
Can I be responsible for being honest about what I'm looking for? These are all choices. No one has to do any of this stuff. But if you're to choose, if you're to be willing to be responsible for that, it's going to give us a whole new kind of power over those interactions. And again, we don't have to. Bit by bit, it has integrity to say, I'm actually not willing to be responsible for your experience. I'm going to be responsible for going to bed tonight, for going to bed right now.
Yeah.
That can be allowed too. What we're really looking to have you guys look at is, where am I assuming something that's actually keeping me from influencing that very thing that I don't like?
Mm-hmm.
And that takes courage to look at that.
Well, it takes courage, and it takes the willingness. And the other thing about what you were just sharing is it's not significant that being responsible It's not a significant thing. It's not, there's no blame, shame, guilt. That's not what we're talking about that either. It's not over there. It's the willingness to just look and go, okay, well, I'm 100% here. They're 100%. What is there to be responsible for to live a fulfilled life? Because it's really easy to go like that. It's over there with someone else. They did that, so I'm going to feel this way.
I
Really?
think that's the quintessential challenge. That's the quintessential challenge keeping us from being willing to be responsible is, yeah, but why should I? Because she did that, or I did this already, or I've done it 5 times. I've already been the one to reach out. I've already been the one to make the phone call. It's their turn now. And so I think one of those that's very tempting to keep us from actually being willing. And that's allowed too, but I mean, what is it that I think the question to engage in here is where and you've asked me this before, where am I abdicating responsibility? Where am I putting something on someone else that perhaps there's a piece of it that I could adopt?
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. It comes every time. All roads lead to Rome. You turn around and go, am I willing here? Am I willing to be responsible? And as you just alluded to, fine, fair enough. Just say, no, I'm not. Okay, fine then. That has integrity, as you pointed to. Well, now you can't blame, it's not over there anymore. The moment I abdicate being responsible, I gave up the right now to influence anything. I'm now going to be
Right.
at the effect of something.
Right. So that's the cost. That's the cost
That's the cost.
of not being willing to be responsible. I'm giving up that I have power and that I
That's
can
right.
influence this thing.
Well, and said another way, we've just sentenced ourselves to being a victim
Right.
in a nanosecond, a victim of circumstances, a victim of someone else's behavior, a victim of the traffic. That's my favorite. That's my ultimate favorite one. Seeing people flipping someone off in the traffic or being frustrated because there's a traffic jam at 4 o'clock on Friday in Vancouver or LA. Really?
It's my
Really?
excuse for flipping them off. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you went out at 4 o'clock on a Friday in Vancouver, one of the most congested cities in the world, and now you're going to be upset and a victim of it?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I think that's what it looks like. It looks just like that on a daily basis. You know,
Yeah.
I'm late. Who is there to blame? You know,
Yeah.
I was stood up. Who's there to blame? I was broken up with. Who's there to blame?
Yeah.
And it can be blame on ourselves, you know, and that's, I think, one of the greatest skills is to be able to separate what we're talking about here. Because most of us are taught that responsibility equals blame. Like, who's responsible for this? Oh, it's you.
Yeah.
You're the one to blame. Yeah, and that's not what we're talking about here.
No.
We're talking about choice that is free from blame. It's free from guilt. And it's really asking the question of like, how much power do I want to have? How much power do I want to have over my marriage, over my dating, over being a parent? And you don't have to have the answer to that right away. We're challenging you to consider the question of how willing am I to make a difference? Am I more committed to fighting for my point of view, or
being right?
Fighting to be right, fighting from my perspective, or could I be open to a new possibility, a new way to communicate?
Well, and what an extraordinary way to live. Imagine we're talking 10x in relationship here. Imagine, let's go back to the baby coming home and the cranky wife hands the cranky baby to you, and rather than being at the effect of it and rah, 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 going hugging the baby and the wife in a big group hug, and you being the influencer in that moment, that very moment, because we're willing to be cause in the matter of how things are going to go for the rest of the evening. We're willing to take responsibility for, I have the skill and the power right now in relationship to alter this moment because I am willing to bring love into this situation. I love my wife. I love my son. I am in love with my family. All right, family, time to regroup here just because we can. or your partner, or your partner's kids, or someone at work. I mean, we could go on for hours about the scenarios alone which there is to be responsible for.
Yeah, as a choice.
And
As a choice. Yeah.
as a choice. And I love that you're saying that, because it's always gets down to choice.
Yeah, it
And
must
then
be
really we go back to the
right.
baby, and then choose not to do anything about it, and then watch how the whole evening unfolds and go, oh my God, I wish I shoulda, coulda, I knew better. Okay, that does happen. We know better. That does happen. Well, there you go, being responsible. Wow, I knew I could influence something. I chose not to. Now I'm sitting here dealing with the consequences of a cranky family or a cranky partner because she's cooked 5 days, or he's cooked 5 days in a row, and I knew it, and I didn't phone at 3 and say, you're not cooking tonight, I'm going to pick you up for dinner, where do you want to go?
Right.
Those small things, they're so small, yet immensely loving to another person, because it's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of knowing what the other person's doing, being willing to be responsible for how the evening's gonna go. And
It was
I
like a
say it's an extraordinary way to live.
yeah, it was like a compounding result in either direction. You know, I can abdicate responsibility and expect someone to do something about this. And in turn, I end up being stuck in my relationship or stuck in my job or stuck in a situation. Or I can get curious about how I can make a difference and not leave it up to somebody else. Like, what an extraordinary way to live.
You and I were talking about this yesterday on our call, where around when people separate or divorce, mostly they want a divorce from the behavior, not
Right.
the person.
Right.
They fell in love with this person, and then behaviors come into it, and then we want a divorce from that person. No, it's the behavior we want a divorce from. We want a divorce from our own inaction. We want a divorce from our own perception of that person or the behavior. We
Yes,
think that separation is going to change everything, and I'm not so sure about that.
yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. And I got a coaching call coming up in 7 minutes, so we'll go for a few more minutes here. Divorcing or breaking up, like you just said, we get into a relationship because we believe in something, we believe in a sort of connection or chemistry with that person, that we can build something together. And we work with a lot of singles, we work with a lot of couples, and so often in couples that are ending relationships, or whether they're married or not, they don't actually want to break up with the person. They actually love the person, but they want to break up with a new behavior that's come into the relationship, or a habit. They become a drinker, or they've become someone who reacts, or they've become someone who's less attentive. And it's like, I would love you. I want this to work. Can you put your phone down? Can you give me some attention when I walk in the door? Can we get adventurous in our sex life? You know, all these things, like that relationship could so work. And that's why I'm so moved when people are willing to do this work, because it's like, wow, you just completely transformed the trajectory of your relationship because you were willing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're often not likely going to do that because we get so frustrated by the behavior that it convinces us to blame the other person. And then we get really right about that. Like, this relationship would be so good if you were just nicer to me. And you're right. I mean, we as coaches can sit there and go, I agree with you. Now we're just a couple of people agreeing with each other, and fuck all has changed.
In plain English.
In plain English. So now it's like, okay, we don't want that. We want something to actually change.
Mm-hmm.
So can I look at where I may be influencing this, or not willing to influence it?
Yeah.
Now that was going to be kind of a shot in the dark of a question, but it's going to put us on the path to actually make a difference. That's where coaching comes in. Is we can guide you in that. We can ask you the key questions to to find out a new path. That's why we're talking with you guys now, is to help you demonstrate how we do this thing, so you can get at the source of change instead of, wishing things would be different.
Yeah, we're not wishing that. Wishing is for the well. Well, and the statement, I know you got to go. The whole statement, I studied the state where I actually got connected to this is I started to study it. And I took every word and I looked them all up in the dictionary. And then I went to the Latin root of each word, how each word was constructed from Latin. And you could go even further and look at the Sanskrit of each word, because our language is all based out of Sanskrit, which was designed from the tone that was coming out of one's mouth.
Wow.
So our tones influence what is being said. So words are tones that influence the world around us. So
Wow.
I love this statement because we can take it and dissect it right down to the word, to the vowel structure, everything, and look to see what actually gets connotated around us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say it one more time because I know we got to go. Responsibility begins with the willingness to be cause in the matter of one's own life, whether experienced at the time or not. And we could actually do a call in each one of those words and phrases, how they come together. And I'd like to keep expanding on this more because there's a lot in it, and particularly in the realm of relationship.
I guess that means we'll be doing some more lives.
Which I love.
Me too.
I love.
So if you want to join the Love of Fear program, visit my website. If you want to work with Roy and have him coach you on the Love of Fear program one-on-one, I'm going to put a link below and you can find out all the details on how to do that. Thank you guys so much for getting into this conversation and actually looking at how you can influence your life. It takes courage to engage in this kind of thing. It's uncertain, it's unknown, and therefore is limitless. So let's continue that path and leave the predictability behind.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.